In this video, we are going to tackle one of the most important concepts in geometry, finding the bearing of an angle. A bearing is very important for determining the direction from one point to another. It's used a lot in navigation, geography, and maths. You can think of bearings as giving someone a very precise direction, almost like telling them exactly which way to turn in degrees. Now, when calculating a bearing, there are two important things to remember. First, a bearing is always measured in a clockwise direction from north. Second, it is always represented using 3 digits. This means if you calculate a bearing of 45 degrees, you will not write it as 45 inches, but as 0.45 degrees. This 3-digit system helps to avoid any confusion and makes everything very clear. Let's start with a very basic question. In this question, we are asked to find the bearing of y from x. Here we have y and x. When finding the bearing, we will follow 2 simple steps. Step number 1 is to figure out which is the starting point and which is the destination, or final point. For example, since we need to find the bearing of y from x, x is our initial point and y is our final point. You will draw a line from your initial point to the final point, and you can also add an arrow to indicate the direction clearly. Now for step 2, you will first draw a line showing the north direction from our initial point. Next, use a protractor to measure the angle between this north line and the line pointing towards y that we drew in the previous step. One important thing to remember is that you will always measure the clockwise angle from the north direction. Since this is the north, we will draw a clockwise angle like this. Always remember to go clockwise. You will not use the angle that goes in the anti-clockwise direction. Suppose this angle turns out to be 60 degrees. We write our angle as 060 degrees, and that is the bearing of y from x. Now, let's look at another question. In this example, we need to find the bearing angle for both directions, from x to y and from y to x. The lines indicating the north direction have already been drawn for us. If these lines weren't given, we could have simply drawn them ourselves. Let's start by finding the bearing of x from y. This means our initial point is y and our final point is x. For the first step, we will draw a line from our initial point to our final or destination point. From the initial point, that is y, we will measure the angle in a clockwise direction. Now, measuring this angle can be a bit tricky sometimes, so you can start by measuring the smaller interior angle. Let's say this angle is 40 degrees. To find the bearing, that is the larger blue angle, we can subtract 40 from 360 to get 320 degrees. Therefore, the bearing of x from y is 320 degrees. For the next part of the question, we need to find the bearing of y from x. This means our initial point is x and our final point is y. This time, the direction of the line is from x to y, not y to x. We draw the angle in the clockwise direction from x. This gives us the bearing of y from x, which comes out to be 140 degrees. There are actually 2 methods to solve this part. The first is to use a protractor to measure the angle, as we did earlier. Alternatively, you can use the property of parallel lines that states the sum of the interior angles between 2 parallel lines is 180 degrees. This property can sometimes make finding the bearing quicker. Now, let's move on to a more challenging question that might come up in your exam. You can pause the video here and try solving it yourself first. As you have read, this question is divided into 2 parts, and we need to determine the location of C. We are given the bearings of C from both A and B, and we need to draw these bearings one by one. We are told that the location of C is on a bearing of 140 degrees from A, so we take A as our initial point and draw a line at a bearing of 140 degrees from A. Using a protractor, we measure 140 degrees and then draw a dashed line in that direction. C could be located anywhere along this dashed line. Next, we need to find the bearing of C from B. Again, we take point B as our initial point and draw a 250-degree angle in a clockwise direction. We draw another dashed line from this point. The intersection of these two lines gives us the location of C. Thank you for watching this video. If you learned something new today, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, My Exam Revision, for more content like this. Thank you, and see you in the next one.